We all neighbors, eh? Well, they say women come from Venus, men come from Mars.
I believe it.
I have no idea. I never been to Mars.
We started almost 10 years ago, and it was just like a bunch of friends, and we decided for whatever reason that we start a band together. Everyone played their instruments, and when we started we were kind of just doing it because it was something to do, and it was fun. I don't think we ever actually intended it for it to be like our career, and you know, for this to be like this, which probably works out for the best anyways, right? Because you know, if you're kind of doing it to be rich and famous and then to be a big band right off the start, I think more often than not you're painting yourself into a corner. Because we kind of started off just as pals, we took it at our own pace, and it was a slow climb for us, but you know, that's what worked for us, certainly. Growing up and starting in a band, it was interesting at first because we started touring across Canada and the US and no one had any idea who we were. And I can't tell you how many nights you'd sit there and be like, why are we doing this? Like, I remember being in Thunder Bay playing to just a sound man. I remember being down in the US playing beside a venue in a clothing shop when Misery Signals was playing there the same night, who are, you know, friends of ours. It was tough, but you know, going through experiences like that, I think made us appreciate what we have now, and kind of grounded us and made sure that when success did come, we were really humble about it, and we appreciated, you know, how hard it was to get there. It was cool though, because like I said, we were all best friends, so we were kind of going through this shit together, and I think it just, you know, grew us a lot closer as buds. And in the end, when you do this for a living and you spend so much time together, and literally when you're on tour, you're with each other every hour of every day. If you're not a tight group, it's a pretty miserable way to make a living, that's for sure. My family specifically was, I don't know, a little, I don't want to say they weren't supportive, but my parents both grew up on farms in Saskatchewan. And so, you know, being, you know, music and being in a band, that wasn't something that they were familiar with for themselves or anyone around them. It was like a really weird thing for them, and you know, they grew up where you work hard, you go to college, you try to get a job, you try to make a family. So I think they were as supportive as they could be at the beginning, and you know, I'll never forget the day when our first music video got played on Much Music, and I was at home and my mom was there. And you know, it was cool because even though they didn't really understand what it's like to be in a band, I think something like that they appreciated. Same thing when we got our first Juno nomination. It's something that's so universal that you don't really need to be in the music scene to get how big of a deal that was. And I could tell how proud they were, and it was just, you know, it was cool for them to, I guess, have a little slice of it through that. You know, I think one of the big challenges is being from Edmonton. There's this perception, and probably rightfully so, but the entire Canadian music industry is based out of Toronto. All the labels, all the agents, everyone. And you know, a lot of bands moved to Toronto to get discovered, and we never took that route. We kind of believed that we could slug it out in Edmonton, and even though the music scene wasn't the best, and it was really hard at times, because I remember when we first started, we were selling lots of albums, we had great crowds, but we couldn't get signed to a record deal because labels in Toronto didn't really acknowledge us. Until you were a big band in Toronto, in their eyes, you weren't a big band in Canada. And we didn't kind of feel the same way, and we stuck to our guns. And I think, you know, looking back, I would still encourage bands to make something special out of their hometown and worry about touring the country and getting in people's ear in time. It's just, it's really tough when you're not in Toronto. But I think if you put in enough time, and I think it's also worth it in the end, because when we finally did get some hype in Toronto, and we finally did get signed, when we put out a record, the rest of the country already knew about us. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that we make millions of dollars. We make a very comfortable living, and we get lucky to tour the world and have the best times of our lives. But at the end of the day, if you're not really being, you know, honest with your creative process and getting to make something that you really love, it's not worth it. Like, travel is hard. Being away from your friends and family is hard. there's a lot of parts of this business that aren't very glamorous, but every night when I get to go on stage and I get to play the songs that I've written with my lyrics and seeing people singing back to me, that kind of makes all the shitty parts not matter anymore. And so for me, the creative process is everything. And for us, we've never been on a major label. We've been offered lots. We've been offered to buy out of our contract, and we say no, because on an independent label, we get to make the music we want and how we want to make it. There's no person telling us what we have to do, what we need to be, what we need to sound like to be on the radio, and I wouldn't change that. It's not worth the extra exposure to have to make something that's not really yours. You know, it's gotten to the point where I don't really look up to or worship bigger bands. I respect what they've done, but the people that keep me going are a lot of our friends in bands, who, some of which are, you know, do a little better than us, some of which who don't. Like, you know, our friends from Vancouver called Living with Lions were actually in Toronto last night, and we got to see them. They just got back from Europe. You know, we came to their show. Bands like that, bands like Alexis on Fire, I guess, who are no longer a band, but, you know, are good buds. And it's just cool to see other bands who you know are doing it for the right reasons. They kind of give you the motivation to keep going on and do well. So yeah, it'd be them. Motivational stories. Whew. You know, I don't know, motivational stories. Like, our band has, like I said before, had such a slow climb to success that, you know, I think not so much a story to tell, but just a lesson I think a lot of young bands could learn is that things don't happen overnight, and that's not a bad thing. And you know, take the time to appreciate the times that aren't that great, because when you get through them, and you know, for me, one of my biggest things I'll never forget when we went over to Japan for the first time, and I remember getting off the plane, and our first show was in Tokyo with 1,400 people, and I remember just turning to the guys and just being like, well, this is what we do now, like this is where we are. Again, remember the times when we would tour across Canada and there would be no one there, and now we're literally flying across the world for the first time, and there's people singing along, and it's just, I really think bands these days are too anxious to get on TV and be the next big thing so quickly, and even though the long road's a little harder, it's much more gratifying. And you look at us, we've been a band for 10 years, and these days bands don't stick around for 10 years because it's here one day, gone the next. So there is a lot of benefit in taking it slow, I think. Something you would not know about me. Me personally, I used to be big into hockey. I played minor hockey growing up with Dion Phaneuf, who obviously around these parts is you know, a pretty big deal now, being a captain of the Leafs. But yeah, I mean, I was a hockey player. I still do play hockey, and no, granted I suck now, but you know, I still love hockey, and it's probably a pretty Canadian thing to do. But you know, it's funny, most people don't incorporate musicians with any sort of athletic ability whatsoever. So oh, and like when we played at the Junos last year, I got to play in like the Juno hockey game versus the NHL alumni, and it was great because, you know, I got my own little like ego boost on red carpet. Like the next day we were watching E-Talk, and Jim Cuddy was on the red carpet, and he's the captain of the musicians, Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo, and they asked him, like, you organized the hockey game, who's the best musician hockey player? And he's like, oh, the guy from 10 Second Epic, you know, pretty good. I was like, yes! I'm like, I mean, I'll be the biggest band in the world. And I'm trying to hold it down as one of the best hockey playing musicians. So hopefully we're nominated again this year, and I plan on playing that hockey game again and ripping it up. Hey, what's going on? My name's Andrew and I'm with the band 10 Second Epic. I'm here with HiddenCitySounds. Do what you love.